Okay, welcome to today's lesson. Today we're going to be looking at the law of demand. This is what you would have seen on the boards if you were in class today. If you want to see it, push pause. If not, we're moving on. For a warm-up question, I want you to think about this. Would a company be wise to create a fat-gaining drink called Fat Fast? Instead of 180 calorie meals, it's 4,000 calories. Instead of 50% less sugar, it's 700% more sugar. Does that really sound like a good business? Now, the point that I'm trying to get to is not that nobody would want to have a weight-gaining type of drink, because there are things out there that are weight gainer. I don't think Fat Fast really sounds like the most appropriate type of weight-gaining supplement. But really what I want you to be thinking about is the fact that would there be a great demand for this like there potentially is a great demand for Slim Fast? And the answer is probably no. And by demand, we'll look at that a little bit more in depth today in this lesson, but I want you just to be thinking about, are people going to want to buy that? Because it's good to be able to create a unique product and something that is different, but you also want to make sure that it's something that people want to buy, as well as that you can make profitable. Today we're looking at consumer demand, with the little subtitle being give the people what they want, because that's what consumers are all about. Our target for today, I can explain what demand is, and secondly, I can identify at least 3 factors that increase and decrease demand for a product. We're going to look at it from a lot of different perspectives. Number 1 is obviously price, as you saw yesterday with the law of supply. However, there are also a lot of other factors that would affect demand. Now, I showed you this picture yesterday, talking about all the different varieties of basketball shoes, and what we suggested is that businesses have to be able to make money in order to want to produce it. So they must be able to make a whole lot of money creating all these different shoes. So it's not like there's just one basketball shoe making company out there. This implies that there's a lot of demand for the item. So it's not that there's just a very small group of people who buy basketball shoes. There's a very large group of people, being that there's a large demand. Same thing holds true for our designer purses. Obviously, it's not just a very small group of people in our population who want to buy these, or else there would only be 1 or 2 makers of these. Instead, there are many designer purse makers. Let's look at these situations right here to explain something else. How is it that on Route 19, going from Upper St. Clair into Mount Lebanon, these 3 restaurants all existed, let's say 15 years ago? Not even, probably I think Chi-Chi's was the last out, and that was in the early 2000s. But let's say we go back 15 years. We've got all 3 of these restaurants there: Outback, Ground Round, and Chi-Chi's. What caused Outback to be the only one that is still around? Well, there's 2 things that we can look at. For the Ground Round, its location wasn't ideal. So even though it might not be about the pricing, and I'm not going to say that the pricing and the quality was tremendous, but even if those weren't as ideal, their location was very poor, because in order to get to it, you actually had to turn in. And I'll show you a little drawing here. So if this is Route 19, and we'll say Route 19, well, let me draw this for you here, then I'll show you. Okay, this is Route 19, and you would be going this way from Upper St. Clair into Mount Lebanon. This right here is the Galleria. I'll just give that a G. Now, the Ground Round was located right here, and one of the big problems with the Ground Round is that the only way that you could get into it was by turning right this way or right this way. So if you were coming the way that we will come from, going down Route 19 in this direction, in order to get into the Ground Round, you would have to turn left and then try to get across traffic to come into the parking lot. Not very ideal, and really that location hurt it quite a bit, and ultimately eventually did go out of business. Now, Chi-Chi's, on the other hand, what happened to Chi-Chi's? Well, with Chi-Chi's, they ran into a minor problem in that some people died after they ate at Chi-Chi's. Yeah, kind of minor. There were 4 people who died of a hepatitis A outbreak, in which basically there were contaminated, I think it was green chilies or green onions, I'm not sure what the exact thing, but regardless, the demand for Chi-Chi's went down tremendously because people said, look, people died after they ate there. Therefore, people in the future are not going to want to eat there, and that definitely did cause a Yesterday we talked about Starbucks and Krispy Kreme. What happened to those 2? Well, with Starbucks, the economy hit a very rough patch here at the beginning of the 2000s. So people who previously were spending $5 a morning buying coffee started, or I shouldn't say all people, but many people who were doing that looked at their budget and said, you know what, we can't really afford to do this anymore. And many people were losing jobs as well. So maybe people who actually had jobs and could afford it lost their job and no longer could afford to go and get a Starbucks $5 coffee. And they decided to instead make it at home, or maybe even just stop drinking coffee. I'm not going to say that there's one exact answer to it, but the economy basically dramatically impacted Starbucks. On the other hand, Krispy Kreme. With Krispy Kreme, a lot of people started looking at these donuts and comparing the health information related to it and said, you know what, maybe these Krispy Kreme donuts aren't a good decision because eating a couple of these a day is leading to weight gain or other health complications. And really, at this point in time, it was this change in fad, let's say, in which a lot more people started becoming very health conscious. And really around the same time that you see Krispy Kreme going down, you start seeing the rise in the amount of gyms that we saw in the area because people are now starting to get more into fitness. So Krispy Kreme didn't match with that, and that would be a cause that we could say really damaged Krispy Kreme as well. Now we've so far talked about what some of the things are that affect demand that are kind of different. Let's get on to the main point then. What is demand all connected to? It is, by definition, the amount of a good that consumers will buy at a given price. Now keep in mind it's at a given price. Okay, we have to always connect this with price. Consumers being the buyers, and demand is dependent on many different factors as we talked about. For instance, let's look at the video game systems that we have out today. What would you consider if you were getting ready to purchase your first video game system? Which one would you buy? Let's say PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, or Nintendo Wii. Well, if you think about it to yourself, and here's some things that I might suggest. You might want to look at the price of these and say, okay, which one is the cheapest? And maybe not even just the video game system, but also the games and accessories that go with it. Maybe you want to say, okay, my friends all play Xbox, and if I get Xbox, I can play with them a little bit better whenever I go over to their house, or I can just play online against them since the online gaming is so popular nowadays. You could also look at it for the graphics and the quality of the video games. Maybe you like one specific video game franchise. Like, for instance, if you really like the Mario Kart, you can't play that on PlayStation or on Xbox, so you would have to get the Wii. Or if you are really into some other sort of game that appears only on one of the other systems, that would be something to consider as well. So lots of considerations there. The one big one, though, that we can't forget about that I haven't really emphasized enough just yet is price. The law of demand states that the lower the cost of a product, the greater the demand will be. And the higher the cost, the lower the demand will be. Think about McDonald's dollar menu. With McDonald's, they know that if they sell stuff for really, really cheap, that there's going to be a lot of people who want to buy it. So what they've effectively done is said, you know what, we can have some things that are a little bit less expensive on our menu because that'll bring in more people, and that creates more demand for McDonald's in general. Now on this graph over here, I want to explain this because in yesterday's PowerPoint I didn't explain it, and I think there was a little bit of confusion there. First, let's look at this. The origin is 0, 0. If we go up in the Y column here, Y-axis, we have price. So as we rise up, the price gets higher. In the X-axis, we have going from 0 to 90. That is the quantity. Now this can be either quantity demanded or quantity supplied. Today we're looking at quantity demanded. Let's imagine that we're talking about a shirt from American Eagle. If that shirt is on sale for $50, the demand is 0. Now, as the price starts going down, let's say the price gets to about $35, the demand, if we were to follow it straight down here, would be about 30 of those shirts. Continuing on, if we get all the way down to $10, the demand for that product has moved all the way over to around 80. So as you can see, there's a direct connection here between the demand and the price. Now, let's consider some of the other factors that affect demand. We have the location and convenience of an item. When you think about it, there are a lot of gas stations that are located directly next to highways, or really places that you can get off of a highway. Why is that? Simple. It's convenience. And that's one thing that we actually connected to the ground round as being something that potentially damaged it, was the fact that it wasn't very convenient to get into. There are many other restaurants in other locations that do very well, and maybe even the ground round has done better in other locations, but that location wasn't an ideal one for them, at least. The condition of the economy definitely affects certain things like Starbucks. What I would really say the condition of the economy affects are things that are not needs, things that are more just random desires, because when you have those, well, you don't really need to get it. So if you can spare a couple bucks a week and not get Starbucks coffee and people are feeling like they're a little bit tight, that might be something that happens, is that they're not going to go and buy Starbucks. A change in popularity also can affect it, like we talked about with Krispy Kreme, and the popularity wasn't as much donuts anymore, it was more so into the exercise type of thing. Now, think about this as well. Is Krispy Kreme the only donut store that isn't doing well now? I'd say there's probably a whole lot of other ones. I can't really think of many that exist anywhere, seeing that Dunkin' Donuts is no longer in Bridgeville where it used to be. Krispy Kreme has really disappeared from everywhere except for Cranberry that I know of in the area. And there's a whole lot of these donut places that went out of business. Now, some of them are doing other things so they don't completely fall out of business, like Dunkin' Donuts sells coffee now in stores and things of that nature, but purely donut shops, not really around the same as they used to be. And lastly, reviews and ratings. The Dark Knight movie came out a few years back, and this was a huge movie. And the first weekend for it was great, and then it got tremendous reviews. And then what happened for weeks to come? It was still number one. And that's the thing that's really interesting is that the demand, maybe it did increase over time, even though the price didn't go down. And that's what I want you to think about. These factors that are listed up here, all of these, they're affected by things that are not price. So price is the number one most important factor that affects demand, but location can affect it, the condition of the economy, change in popularity, and reviews and ratings also can have a major impact on it. Now, let's do a little bit of a review activity thinking about this. Now, I'm not going to get into all the details there. Basically, I just want you to tell me, what do you think is going to happen to the demand for a product when we talk about some of these situations occurring? With Droid phones, let's say that the price changes from $200 to $500. Is that going to decrease demand for the product? The answer is, well, probably yes, if it's just a lateral change, if it's the exact same phone. Potentially, though, think about this. What if it's the newest phone and it has something really cool and up to date on it and the price goes up? Well, maybe that's going to be more important than the price change, so some people will still buy it. It's tough to say, but I would say definitely an increase of $300 from a $200 product, that's going to be a major hit on the demand for it because the price went up. Second, Nintendo Wii. Let's say the price goes from $249 to $100. What's going to happen to the demand here? You would say that it's going to go up, and I would agree on that. But here's the only other thing to consider is that there are other factors out there in the marketplace that will impact this. For instance, with the new technology that Xbox and PlayStation 3 are using with Move, and I'm not sure of the other one off the top of my head, that's really going to affect Nintendo Wii, and it has already affected Nintendo Wii's demand because now people are saying, you know what? Wii was unique in that it was the only one with the movement technology. Now that these other systems have that, maybe we should consider that. I mean, PlayStation 3 has a Blu-ray player, so maybe that's something that's going to sell that over the other ones. But there are a lot of factors like this that you would need to consider. So the price change is definitely going to help, but some of those other things are going to hurt the demand. So it's interesting how they all work together. Outback Steakhouse. It won an award for the best steak in Pittsburgh according to a Zagat survey a couple years ago. Is that going to increase the demand? I would say definitely yes. So, if you've gone there before and you don't like it, you might say, okay, I don't really care about that survey. But some people are going to say, you know what, I've never been there before. I hear this ranking. Hey, let's try it out. Let's see if it's really worth it. And then that might be something that will increase the demand of Outback and really help them over time in business. Now, think about this, too. It's also about timing and significance of some of these events as well. Like Pittsburgh Steelers in a football game. A preseason game against the Carolina Panthers, you might be able to sell your tickets, maybe. Might be difficult finding people to buy them. Let's imagine that instead, though, we're talking about having AFC Championship game tickets like there were last year against the Jets. Would that be worth a whole lot of money? The answer is definitely yes. I mean, you've got people that are paying double and triple face value for seats or more because they really want to go to these games. So that's an interesting thing when you think about the significance of an event can change the demand for those tickets or for that event. In Pittsburgh a few years back, they determined that, you know what, one of the big things hurting the Pirates is the fact that their stadium, Three River Stadium, was very poor. It wasn't really ideal. It wasn't a great place to watch a game. So hundreds of millions of dollars went into building PNC Park. So all this money goes into building this park, and that was going to be the big thing that changes everything around and makes it so that more people go to Pirates games and it can bring in more revenue and all of that good stuff. But it makes you wonder, how much has the demand changed when you build a nicer park but you double the price? Well, there are a decent amount of people who are going to games. I'd say the biggest thing that affects the demand for the Pirates, though, in seriousness, is how good they are as a baseball team. So it's kind of interesting to think about that, and you might connect that back directly to, well, how much money are you going to spend on your players? So really a tricky situation. It's really complicated figuring out how to do what's best for the Pirates franchise from a financial perspective. And lastly, McDonald's. What do you think about this? Do you think that advertising increases demand? Well, the answer I'm going to say is definitely yes if you advertise well. And that's kind of our lead into tomorrow's lesson that you guys are going to be looking. So to end up here, what I want you to do is to list 3 different ways that demand is both increased and decreased. It can be anything It can be specific, it can be generic, whatever you would like. Just think about that as kind of a last way to wrap up our lesson today on demand and the law of demand.